Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Performance of Finance Scrutiny Committee meeting, 13th of July, 2022. Catherine, apologies for absence.
We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Galliford and Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Deach has joined us online, as has Councillor Barnett and Councillor Fitzgerald.
And Councillor Whitcroft.
Oh yes, and Councillor Whitcroft, sorry.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments, amendments? No? Great. I need someone to propose and someone to second it. Proposed by Councillor Rice, seconded by Councillor White. Thank you very much. Moving on. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? None whatsoever. Right, we now shall get into the meat of this meeting, which is page number 7, agenda item 4. Today, this is, I believe, is being presented by Louis Livingston, Officer Louis Livingston, and possibly by the leader, and anyone else who wants to dive in from the exec. So I shall leave either Councillor McLafferty or Officer Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. So I bring forward the end-of-year performance report for 21-22. This sets out the performance against objectives set and priorities and success measures for the year 21-22. With regards to the two annexes, you have two annexes, one setting out the performance against objectives, and Annex B is around the success measures. I appreciate it is quite a big document, and apologies for that, but we obviously just want to make sure that we get all the detail in there with regards to obviously what has been achieved throughout the year. Just to give a quick summary, so just with regard to the first annex, which is the objectives and projects, we've also measured these in a green, amber and red. So we have 74% green, we have 23% amber, and we have 3% which are red. And with regard to the amber and red, just to put a measure against that, so it's where the measure has, or the objective has been missed by less than 10% or less is amber, and the red is where it's more than 10% that it's been missed by. So that's just to give you an understanding. With regard to the layout, when we set the annual plan in 21-22, we had a different structure, so a different management structure. So it has been laid out in the new management structure, and also since the annual plan setting, we also adopted a new 5-year strategy. But so again, we do now make reference to our obviously 3 priorities, which is environment, health and quality of life, economy, and effective and responsive council. So members, I really just set this before you and obviously take any questions, obviously from an officer's perspective, but appreciating that the leader is also here with regard to the performance report.
Thank you very much. Committee members and members online, if you are referring to an item, please refer to the page number or whatever is nearest, because it's a large document, so it becomes easier for the leader or Officer Livingston to actually address it accordingly. Thank you. Councillor Deach? Sorry. Can I ask Councillor Morgan, who is actually present here, to ask a question?
Yeah, it's just on page 21, EC9, climate change, just regarding the amber kind of the use of amber there, because obviously it says ongoing work, risks to achieving overall targets. And I'm just, obviously it's a long-term strategy, the climate change strategy is there. And I'm just wondering why the use of amber when, if you turn over the page onto 22, the next one is green, and then there's some other ones where it's the work's kind of ongoing and a long-term one, and I'm just kind of, I don't know if I've just kind of misunderstood the way it's been labelled, and also if I could just ask what the assessment of the risks to achieving overall targets are. That would be something that the Climate Change Working Group would want to look at if the assessment from officers is that there's risk to achieving. Thank you.
So just picking up that point, Councillor Rise. So I'm just having a quick look. Obviously, with regards to achievements, I think it's amber because we haven't achieved that within the year. So we haven't achieved that from April 21 through to March 22 around the electric vehicle charging points. I appreciate there is ongoing work, and actually this does link back, and what we are going to start doing going forward is I appreciate you have the action plan for climate change, and it is making sure that we've got those clear references to those two documents. I think Nick Stevens is actually online, and I don't know if he has a better answer than the one that I've just given there. If you can answer, Nick, I would appreciate it.
Louise is entirely correct. It is purely down to the delivery of the electric vehicle charging points, and that's why it comes out as an amber in totality.
Sorry, I'm just referring to page 21, which is the first mention of climate change within the annual report. Obviously, I note there's the delivery of the electric vehicle, and that is delayed. I understand why that's amber. Obviously, on page 21, it's amber because it says ongoing work, risks to achieving overall targets. And I'm just wondering what assessments being made at the moment, considering that we're 9 years away from 2030. What risks are we assessing are there now? Because that's the way I'm reading EC9, SHBC 1 on page 21. This is the general strategy to be carbon neutral by 2030, and I'm just wondering where we are. 8 years now, not 9, sorry.
Sorry. Councillor Livingston, I think the CEO wants to say a word or two.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a really reasonable question. I think it's fair to say that this is taking a prudent perspective on it. It's recognising that the Council's targets are really ambitious, and that I think we're going to need to see a lot more tangible implementation on the ground before we can be confident that we're really making the inroads that we need. And I think whenever you're developing a longer term programme, what you would ideally want is a lot of really good progress in the first few years and sort of de-risk it by then the final few years being much more straightforward. And I don't think we've quite got the momentum that we need yet. It's not far off. Really good work in the pipeline. I think some of the things that are amber later on, they're in the pipeline, they're coming through, there's procurement processes underway. So I'm feeling much more positive that we will see a significant uplift over the coming year because all these things have been sort of in development. And then I think we're more likely to head towards the green. But at this stage, it's about erring on the side of caution and making sure that we don't get complacent, but actually an amber tells us we need to be working even harder at this for the coming year. I hope that's okay.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor Deitch.
Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
I don't have anything in the chamber, do I? No. Councillor Deitch.
Thank you very much, and apologies I'm not at the meeting tonight, but I am very busy at work at the moment and got home late this evening, so apologies. Now, before I became active in the Climate Change Working Group, I wasn't really that aware of what was going on in terms of the work around climate change. And since I became more active with the group, obviously, what I'm hearing tonight, what Nick has just said and so on, that there is a lot of good work been going on. No doubt about that. And I ought to congratulate Morgan for heading up the working group on that. Credit where credit's due and all the rest of it. However, I think there are some small things that we could do now that would help go into amber and green on the RAG rating. So, for instance, I raised it the previous working group that one Friday evening at 6 o'clock, I was dropping my daughter off in the town centre and noticed every single light on in the building. You know, now perhaps part of that training process that we're talking about with staff and everything is just to maybe run a training session on how to turn a light off. You know, I know it. That might sound flippant, but the thing is that we declared a climate emergency several years ago, and I'm not seeing anything that indicates that there's an emergency, quite frankly. And I want to see more action in terms of the things that we can do now, because sometimes it's the little things that make the big difference. We're also all aware here about how much money this council has or doesn't have, more to the point. Well, every light that's switched off is another penny in the coffers. And as my late Jewish grandfather used to say, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. So if we can try to focus some energy, please, on some of the little things that will make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ditch. I don't think you're expecting a reply to your speech, but...
I would like a reply, actually, Chairman.
Councillor, sorry, CEO, sorry, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Deach. This is something that we do take really seriously. I'm often the last person to be leaving the building in the evening, and we've got quite good daylight at the moment, but earlier in the year when we had less daylight, I would be navigating my way out of a completely dark building because all the lights had been switched off. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the cleaners are busy cleaning the building and navigating their way around, and they need to have the lights on for that. The police are here 24/7 and they have their lights on, but a lot of effort has been made since the Climate Change Working Group to make sure that when the lights aren't needed, that they are turned off. But clearly, it's something that we have to keep under review and make sure that that discipline continues going forward. And I certainly want to make the commitment that we will continue to apply a disciplined approach to ensuring that the lights that are on are only on when they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. No, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rice, rather.
Thank you, Chair. It's just kind of building off, as Chair of the working group, it's we're, as I've said to Councillor Deach before, and I do thank him for his kind comments, it's the beginning of the work of the working group was looking purely at the information gathering side from the council. So in the first year, there wasn't a lot of things achieved because it was trying to gather the information. But we are now moving into the stage of, I hope, much more tangible action, as the CEO was mentioning. But obviously things that we have achieved in the time is a training programme for staff members at the council, which is on carbon literacy, on climate change more widely. We've set up a climate change champions programme, which is seeing a lot of support across the staff members of the council. And the council itself has joined various programmes which have enabled them to gain a lot of skills in tackling climate change. So I agree, Councillor Deach, that there's more to do, and there's definitely always more to do, and I want us to be moving faster. And also with the action plan that's up online, and maybe there is a case of, have we communicated that more as widely as we could? Have we shouted about it? It's a very comprehensive plan, as I always say. So that's kind of, I take your comments on board, Councillor Deach, regarding more to do. And we need to kind of redouble our efforts on looking at the small wins, which we have our working group meeting next week, which I will be saying to the members, it's that the members, whatever the members have, and I did mention this to Nick earlier today in my chairman's briefing, it's what can members do to push this forward rather than just relying on officers as well. So, Councillor Deitch, anything that you, and I know that you're the Greener Futures champion from county, so anything that you have from county would be very, very worthwhile to bring forward. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Leader.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Just very briefly, can I just add to what Councillor Deitch said about, I think the working group is one of our best working groups, the climate change one, and thank you to Councillor Rice for chairing it really well. I just want to say, I think there's tremendous appetite across the whole chamber, and the executive are very, very supportive when we have discussions as well. You're absolutely right, Councillor Rice, that the first, you've got to get off the dock first, haven't you? You've got to get moving, get some momentum. And we're all keen to move into the execution phase where we start actually, buying things and building things which are going to help us. So as far as I'm concerned, the working group's doing a good job, and we're all keen, and the executive stands ready and willing to support you.
Thank you, Councillor McLefty. I've got a point, since we're on the same segment. I have a slight concern, and may I congratulate Councillor Rice and Councillor Galliford for chairing and doing a great job out there, along with the officers. Well done to you all. My concern is regarding the electric vehicle charging points. I know I say that you have officers are put in by autumn 2022, but within the same paragraph, you have saying that we are dependent on the county to do the charging points on the pavement, on the roads. Yes. I mean, we are dependent on another authority. How much would that push us back, is my question, because we have an ambitious plan. Can the county keep up with our ambitions, is my question to you. Because if they don't, our plan goes out of sync to a point.
It's another good question, Chairman, because you're quite right. We are able to have total control over our car parks and what goes in our car parks, but we can't exercise complete control over what happens on the highway, because that's a county council arrangement. They have been investigating electric charging points for the highway and piloting ideas for some time, but there is a risk that they will not be able to move as quickly as us, although it is also a top priority for their council also. I know that Nick, Mr. Stevens, who's available on Zoom, is involved in those discussions, and maybe if I could invite him through you, Chair, to just see if he's got an update in terms of the county's work in this area.
Go ahead, Nick.
The Chief Executive is absolutely right, Chair. We are masters of our own destiny in terms of the charging points within our own car parks. And you'll see in the report, it refers to the procurement process that we're going through in that regard. The evaluation will take place the week after next. We've had 3 bidders that have submitted tenders. In relation to county, they are progressing with this, but clearly there's a prioritisation as it's a Surrey-wide project. And as a consequence, we are not convinced that we will be at the front of the queue for on-street electric charging points. I know that our climate change officer is pushing this to try and understand exactly what the prioritisation will be and what it will look like for Surrey Heath, but at the moment we don't have a clear indication.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheeler and Councillor, I don't know whether it was Councillor White or Councillor Wheeler first, but I'll let the ladies fight this one out.
Page 26 and 27, Surrey Environment Partnership. There's a one-liner that says, and reduce fly tipping. And that's the only mention in the whole of the thing about fly tipping. It's a big problem, especially out in the villages. And I just wondered what more can be done and what more is going to be done about it to catch the perpetrators.
Sorry, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor White. you're right. Fly tipping is, it's awful. It's, there's nothing forgivable about it. People do it on purpose. They know perfectly well that they're doing it. They know they're breaking the law, and they're just hoping to get away with it and make some money. It's despicable. I can tell you that we are currently looking at a number of projects where we want to highlight what can be relatively small actions for this council, but can have a big impact on our residents. One of them is, in actual fact, prioritising fly tipping. As you know, we already have a system in place where if fly tipping is discovered, our contractors, Amy, go in and clear it up. A team goes through the waste and looks for any evidence of an address or anything where it came from. And then if we find somebody, then we can go ahead and look at prosecution. What we don't do right now is do something that a number of councils do, which is bring in mobile CCTV, which sounds really expensive and difficult, but we're talking about most of them use GoPros, which you could buy out of pretty much any shop, and you've got a good enough quality of picture that you can get registration numbers and even faces. So that's something that we're expecting to introduce in the very near future.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor White.
Just quickly, I'm on different Facebook pages, and one of them is Thames Valley Council, and every week without fail they are advertising that they have prosecuted yet another fly tipper. I've not seen anything yet that we've done that in Surrey Heath, so I hope that this is going to happen eventually so that we can use that as an example.
If I may. It's great that they're prosecuting every week. I'd like to know how many, obviously, incidents they have compared to us. But one of the strange things, I guess, that we do is that when we do prosecute, we don't actually make a big deal of it. We don't actually put it out and tell everybody that we've done that, which, of course, is a missed opportunity because it would be a deterrent for others, wouldn't it? So it's definitely something we'll pick up on.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points actually relating to it. First and foremost, I'm not sure if I should declare an interest because I drive an EV. But actually, one of the things that's very apparent for me, I don't have a charger at home, so I rely purely on public charging. And it's the different types of chargers. I so wish that Councillor Tapper was here. And actually, as an area that doesn't encourage tourists, we almost want people to stay. I have been known to stay longer in a car park and therefore use the facilities longer because actually it's a slower charge. So it takes my car 4+ hours to charge, doesn't damage the battery and all of those things. So I just wonder how we are analysing and how we're looking at that and what kind of charger we're looking at. And when we're looking at positioning, it's very cheap. I have this evening actually parked in one of our car parks because I'm very low and walked here. So I will be paying for the parking, I'll be paying for the charging. The charging cost is below what I could charge it for at home. So again, we need to look at how we are cost effectively charging for this and not making a loss. And I'm sure they're all things that you are considering. But actually, we don't necessarily, we want people to come, we want to encourage people to use electric cars, but in our own car parks, I would suggest that we possibly want them to stay. So that's it on the EV side. The other thing is actually linking together all of these things and the developing social housing. And I wonder how we're linking in the grants that we are giving to Accent to our green agenda in terms of the focusing of the refurbishments that they're doing. So how many of those are linked to actually insulating the homes that people are living in? And how are we assessing that? And how are we monitoring the bills that people are paying? Because very often, again, in these properties, they are on the least effective way of paying for power. So they're on meters, they're on regularly meters that they have to immediately fund. And I just wondered what targets we've got with Accent Housing between linking their refurbishment with our green agenda to make our environment more sustainable in the long run. So I wondered if I could have a comment back on that, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. Two very good questions, all very important for the residents as much as for the council. I don't know who is going to answer that one. Damien?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think that these are two topics that Mr. Stevens and I have only discussed in the last few days. Mr. Stevens and I both met with the Chief Executive at Accent Housing a couple of weeks ago as well, where the issue not only of the quality of their repairs and maintenance was in discussion, and they're making a significant inroads into tackling the backlog of repairs and maintenance, but also we were talking about retrofitting and ensuring that they were making more progress with their green agenda, particularly for those on lower incomes, where as well as helping with climate change, having good insulation, having good heating systems and hot water systems that are efficient is also really good in terms of reducing their costs of paying for fuel. And so Mr. Stevens might have something further to add on that. And in relation to EV charging, it is a very complex issue. There are different types of chargers, there are different charging rates, and there are different ways of paying. And our teams are currently navigating all of that in trying to work out what the best match is for our car parks. One of the constraints is around fast charging, which is, on the one hand, looks really attractive, but on the other hand, is more likely to damage the battery. And in fact, some cars will not let you charge at a faster rate more than twice because it knows that it will degrade your battery significantly, and slower charging is therefore healthier for the battery. But the biggest constraint is what power supply any particular area can provide. And often that's about the cabling that exists in the area, and moving from a slow charger to a fast charger could cost hundreds of thousands of pounds of infrastructure if it's not already in place. And so a survey is being conducted of our car parks, looking at what kinds of charging we could have. And I think we're very much looking on the charging rate for a mixed economy, so that residents can look at a map and decide what type of charging best suits their needs. We're in discussions with providers at the moment around just trying to untangle the fact that it's so complex for customers. When they turn up to a charger, what's the company? How do they pay? Is it a membership? Every single one seems to be different. It's a bit like, I think, pay by phone in the early days. Lots of companies, lots of different systems, but as the market has matured, there's fewer and fewer suppliers, and the government is certainly talking about introducing some method where you have one approach and lots of different suppliers just to make the process a bit more straightforward. But I think Mr. Stevens might be able to add a bit more detail to what I've covered off, but these two issues are both very live issues for us at the moment.
Mr. Roberts probably put it far more eloquently than I could into relation to the electric vehicle charging. The only point I would add to that is the fact that as part of the evaluation, we're looking at payback. That was one thing that you questioned, Councillor Wheeler, in terms of the profitability. That is part of the evaluation, so that's something we'll be taking into account. And I fully take on board your comment about having a mix of offerings to allow us to have churn within the car parks, but also to meet the needs of other users who want to stay a little bit longer. In relation to the grants for Accent and the effectiveness of their retrofitting, and any data they may have on the reduction in utility bills as a consequence, if I may, I'll go away and speak to Accent about whether they have any data that we can provide to PNF, and then share that with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. Councillor Rice.
Thank you again, Chair. It's just moving on from the point that Councillor Wheeler was making regarding charging points within car parks, and I'm just wondering, it's been discussed within the working group recently, and it's the problem of icing, which is an internal combustion engine car parking in an EV charging space. And I'm just wondering, what can this council do in terms of parking enforcement? Because we now charge in all of our car parks, are we actually able to have our parking enforcement officers ticket a petrol or diesel car that is parked in an EV charging space? And I hope the answer is yes.
The CEO.
I do believe the answer is yes, but also we've been talking about if somebody parks in a charging point that maybe can charge a car in an hour and they stay all day, what do we do about that? Because we need some churn to make sure that space is available for somebody else. And so Mr. Stevens and I have been talking about whether we could charge a penalty if somebody stays longer than they need to. So for example, if they stay an hour, they get charged £10 for every hour that they stay beyond that time, just to make sure that those, in the early days, limited charging infrastructure is accessible to as many people as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Alloway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, could I just ask if there's any collaboration or work with the parish councils to perhaps use some of their properties for EV charging points? I only say this because West End Parish is in principle going to have 4 charging points installed, subject to contract with the provider.
Thank you, Councillor Alloway, and thank you, Chairman. I was aware that some of the parishes are making progress with establishing their own charging points, and I don't honestly know whether we have taken advantage of the opportunity to share some learning between the Borough Council and the parish councils. So if you don't mind, could I just refer this to Mr. Stevens just to see whether either that's something that's happening or it's an opportunity that we now should be taking advantage of.
Mr. Stevens, you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. It's certainly not something that I'm aware of, but I'll check with our climate change officer to see if there were any discussions prior to my arrival.
Thank you very much. Good idea. Councillor Wheeler, did you want to come back on your question earlier on?
I can do very briefly, just to say the most places that I go to, and as I said, I'm becoming a bit of an expert of the number of different apps I've got to have, the different charging rates, places where it's cheap to charge rather than others. Normally it's 4 hours, so you have a 4-hour limit. Currently in our car parks we don't. If we do, we need to finish by 11. So that's the other thing. And the other thing as well is, are we having a joined up approach with Surrey County Council in that those locations that they're considering, we don't want to have 10 within 100 metres of each other, and we also don't want ones on the street that might make our investment in the car park less attractive, because if I could charge on the street and not pay for car parking as well, then that's an option that I'm going to take. So I'm sure you are, but it's just to make sure that Surrey County Council and us aren't overlapping in any way.
I don't know who wants to answer that one. The CEO.
I'm not sure that I can say yes, or even though I think that it's something that should be happening. I'm not sure that I've seen any specific plans from the county around locations that they are currently pursuing, and therefore that the opportunity to coordinate between our car parks and the sites that we've identified that are now going through a procurement process is not there. I think they're just too many steps behind, and that is frustrating, because I think nothing would be, there's a missed opportunity in terms of having something that's properly joined up, but it's only a result of, I think, of the fact that they're not at the same stage as us.
I think it's more of a risk of the fact that we're going to make an investment that we're not potentially going to get the return on if they are next door to us. Nick is shaking his head, so I'm hoping he thinks we're wrong on this.
Go on, Mr. Stevens.
As I understand it, Chair, the Surrey County Council provision will take account of existing charging infrastructure within the local area. And there was obviously a choice for us to wait to see what that looked like in terms of the county offering, but it just isn't prudent. So we've moved forward in the knowledge that they will adjust their provision based on what infrastructure is there at that point in time.
Thank you for that, and I tend to agree with what you just said, not wait for SCC, because SCC is a big animal, it's a bit slower than us. So hopefully we'll move forward and they will follow. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Just to give some assurances as well, it's just I can reassure members that our climate change officer is in regular contact with officers at Surrey County and also across all the other boroughs and districts. There is an officers working group across the 12 councils where they do coordinate and share kind of learning. As the CEO said, Surrey Heath's had a bit of a jump start on a lot of other councils. We were very early in declaring a climate emergency. So a lot of our work is where a lot of other councils are at the moment, so we're kind of ahead of them. So we have an advantage. A lot of the kind of curbside provision of charging, again, won't be, I doubt it will be delivered by county itself. It will be delivered by a provider. And we've already been engaging with providers such as Connected Curb through the working group as well. So we already have the kind of in with them as well. So there is a lot of joined up working going through from our climate change officer and through planning policy as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on climate change? We need to move on. It's already half an hour gone on this item. Any other points? No. All right. I have a question on page 26 regarding developing social housing. As most of you all know, this is kind of my pet topic because the council desperately needs some social housing. I read here, Accent have indicated a target investment program of 92 million in the southeast over the next 5 years. My question to whoever it may be, officers or the exec, what's our share of this? And if at all, I see that they are also saying that you would encourage them to start the application process for this, as to whether this will also add to our existing local plan, or is it new to the local plan? So 2 questions attached to that.
Thank you, Chairman. And the development of social housing has long been a priority of this council, and our relationship with Accent Housing as the main social housing provider in the borough is a really important one, which is why I meet with them regularly and why Mr. Stevens meets with them regularly. We have some sites that we're in discussions with them at the moment, and the council's head of investment and development is on Zoom, so may be able to comment further on those. But we're certainly looking at every opportunity to leverage the resources they have to see more social housing in the borough. That might be a combination of infill in existing estates, or where some estates and some property is now beyond its useful life. Some of our temporary accommodation, for example, have facilities that are no longer fit for purpose that we have been using in the past. And we're in discussions with them about, in effect, knocking those down and putting in their place some new fit-for-purpose social housing. Some of those things will not be in the public domain, so I may not be able to reference them exactly, but my colleagues are on Zoom if they want to fill in any gaps, but it is something that we're actively engaging with Accent Housing on. So that's, I think, Stephen, if he's on the Zoom.
I want to add something in Stephen and, Mr. Wilkinson and to Mr. Roberts. I mean, there was a part 2 to this question, which is, if they're building new, is it going to add to our local plan, or is it within the local plan? Because having sat through the local plan committee, I don't believe there's any mention of this anywhere in the local plan.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. It's a very good question. We do, as CEO has mentioned, keep an active dialogue with Accent, lots of levels actually, but the one I'm interested in is to actually encourage and enable their investment. So the 90 million figure that's referred to was actually Homes England grant funding, which they told us they secured about a year ago. And we thought that was great, obviously, because it was the important step in enabling some of their schemes. We've been as proactive as we can. The main site that we've been talking to them about is actually at Sullivan Road, which is, for those members who are aware, it's the top of Frimley Road as you get close to the A30. And there they had proposals, still have proposals for about 60 houses, I think, from recollection. We entered into an MOU, which was a really important enabler because they didn't own all of the land. We actually owned some of it. And so we gave them that MOU as the comfort that we would support them if they could actually go through pre-app and then bring the funding proposals and the scheme development forward. As of today, they haven't progressed to that level, but that dialogue, Chairman, is still continuing. So.
I'm sorry to push this a bit harder because there's no timeline here. It's actually highlighted as amber, without any timeline. I mean, what we don't want from this committee is for it to be a never-ending timeline. We have to set timelines on this. So I'm going to let the CEO or Mr. Wilkinson answer that question because it is important. Otherwise, it's pointless sending it to scrutiny if you can't get definitive answers. Thank you.
Thank you for pushing on this one. And this is very much why it's amber. This is not something that I think we can feel any sense of success on because I think there's a lot more potential to be extracted from this. Obviously, when you're dealing with a third party, that you're not, they have their own governance and their own set of priorities. We're certainly doing everything we can in terms of engagement, not only with their chief executive, not only with their director of development that leads a lot of this work. They definitely see us as a key partner. They've expressed a desire to want to see more development within Surrey Heath. We are looking at every opportunity possible and we are sharing them with them to test their appetite. I think there is certainly an intent and a desire on both sides. This will turn green when we have a number of sites that are actually in development, which they're not at the moment. So it continues to be something that we're pushing hard on.
Okay, I'm going to push you harder again.
You can,
because
Chairman.
we do need a date. Because, like I said, I don't want to be this amber in a year's time. So after this meeting, what this committee, as a chair, I would like to see a date somewhere along the line as to how far long are we looking at this 90 million or part of the 90 million coming into our borough. Otherwise, it'll be a string that will be strung along for a very, very long time.
I do understand. I do understand the point you're making. One of the good things about having an annual plan is that it provides a real discipline around not being able to drag something out over the period of the 5-year strategy. So you have the opportunity in the coming months to review progress and see where we are. What that will look like, I mean, what you would like me to say, Chairman, is that we're going to have this development in this location operating by this date. And, if it was our money and it was our governance, I think we could pin something down. But this is an independent organisation, and it certainly wouldn't be appropriate in a public forum for me to be suggesting what their decision-making is. Hope you understand.
Mr. Roberts, I fully understand. You understand my position, which we need to push. I'm going to first give it to Sarah. I'm going to give way, you need to give way to Councillor Hawkins. He had his hand first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You said that, if I heard you correctly, that the social housing and affordable homes wasn't an element of the local plan.
I did not mean that. I mean the number of houses. That's what I meant. I don't know whether this is part of the local plan. I was 100% certain. Thank you.
The local plan itself is an aspirational document. It is a long-term document. It is 15 years. And for us to be placing numbers at this stage would be foolhardy and ambitious and unrealistic. And as Chief Executive says, it is that annual iteration where these things are picked up, because we don't know where sites will come. I wish we did, but any sites that are coming forward and be confidential anyway. And but the local plan is the framework document, but not the detailed document. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Hawkins. Councillor McLafferty.
Thank you, Chair. As much as I enjoy watching you poking the Chief Exec and having him squirm a little bit, I just say that this is the end-of-year report, and they're flagging that it's amber because we didn't achieve the milestone, which was a joint venture by December 2021. The target wasn't actually to identify sites, it was to get a joint venture in place. Those discussions are happening, but you're not going to get another date in this plan because it's now been superseded by the next plan, and the date you're looking for is actually in there. So if you look at this year's annual plan and you look at the 5-year plan, you'll see that the plans are in there, the dates are in there. Because you're right, it needs to be specific and measurable and all the things that you're looking for.
If I was given that answer early, I would not push him any further.
And I had that answer, but I continued to just let you just... I told you it was fun watching.
Chairman,
I'm glad you enjoy PNF. I really do. Thank you for attending today. Councillor Ditch.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to contribute to the discussion around accent. We all know, or certainly those of us who have attended the recent External Partnership Select Committee and the briefing by Accent, that, you know, they've got problems, significant problems, I would suggest, in terms of the delivery of their maintenance schedules and so on. Now, we don't need to go over all ground with all of that, but I would suggest that we are exposed as a council to Accent. And while we should definitely be talking to them about joint ventures and so on to build our affordable houses, and shouldn't discount them altogether, I would also like to see us talking to other housing providers. You know, like I say, I think we're already, as it stands now, too exposed to Accent. I know they're making progress. I was very satisfied at the last meeting that they're definitely making progress, and hats off to them for doing that, and long may that continue and all the rest of it. But there are other housing providers out there, and I don't want to see us being overly exposed to anyone in particular. And I would like a response to that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you say you want a response or no?
I do, yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Deach. And so you're quite right. The council is significantly engaged in working with Accent to address the issues and challenges they're facing around turning around the backlog of repairs and maintenance on their stock. They've made some quite significant changes in the last month or two. They've changed their contractor. And when I met them a few weeks ago, they had already reduced their backlog by quite a significant amount, but they recognise that they still have a long way to go. And I think as a council, there seems to be a positive desire for members to stay engaged in that agenda until all of the issues have been resolved, which I absolutely welcome. Accent, I think, have the largest social housing footprint in the borough, but Councillor Deach is right. We are not going to put all our eggs in one basket, and we continue to meet with and engage with other, what I would call probably smaller sized, generally, housing associations, and some very large housing associations around their appetite for development in this borough. And we will continue to do that so that when opportunities arise, we can be confident that the best housing provider is the one that ends up developing an opportunity site that we have. So, yes, agreed, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions further down those pages? Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the success measures tables. It's not really a question about anything on there. It's more, it's incredibly difficult to read because of the size of the font. And I know this is not the first time it's been mentioned, and I don't want to kind of sound like a broken record, but I'm just wondering, is there a different format to present this information? Because looking at it like this is near impossible, and I find it really difficult to actually take in the information. I can look at figures, but I don't really know what it's. I'm not going to go on, but thank you, Mrs.
Just to confirm, Councillor Rice, yes, and I do appreciate we've tried to get this right and we've still not quite got there yet. So, yeah, I take on board. There is a lot of information on there. We've probably tried to reduce the amount of paper, but perhaps this is not the place to have done it. So, yeah, noted.
Thank you. Question for the officers. I mean, page number 39, I presume, local plan. Are we waiting till 2023, or is it end of the year? Sorry, on page number 39, FCS 11.
So, Chairman, the local plan has many stages. a few months ago, we completed the Regulation 18 consultation phase, and I think that was a very positive and successful exercise. The next stage is to address one of the things that we didn't fully cover previously, which was the Gypsy and Traveller sites. And then we move to Regulation 18, submission of the plan, examination in public with an independent inspector, with the aim of, once all those stages have been passed, adopting the plan by December 2023, which is the government set timetable. That's the sort of long stop date, but there's a lot of stages in between. But we're doing, I think, reasonably well, and seem to be on track at the moment for December 2023, but it is tight, and therefore we can't really afford any delay in any of the future stages that we have.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Any other questions on this section before we move on to the small? Councillor Hawkins.
So can I just come back in on that one? I mean, it is green. Yes, we are on target for the plan in 2023, but there's some serious minefields in the process, not least of all the planning inspectorate, the workload they have, and their attitude to the local plan at that point in time when it's presented to them. G&T is going to be a tricky one for us all to face. Notwithstanding that, and we keep hearing noises from the government that they are changing the timetable and changing the criteria for that. And with the, we don't have a secretary for levelling up at the moment. We don't know what's happening, but there's some serious minefields, even if it's a straight line. But to get to that, and I just question, quite frankly, the adoption of the plan by 2023 should not be in green. I know it's not, but I would actually have that underlined in yellow, because just as a flag up, that is by no means a slam dunk, I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I mean, I agree with you. I think it should be yellow rather than green, as if it's done. But it's a work in progress, so let's make it yellow.
Chairman, I think it's really good to err on the side of caution. And Councillor Hawkins is absolutely right. The environment in which we're moving this forward is constantly in flux. And there are a number of proposals at the national level for changes that could impact on this if they come forward. And so, yeah, it's absolutely not something that I think we can rest on our laurels on.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I see Mr. Chinna has joined. I don't know whether you want to say something on this. Mr. Chinna?
Thank you, Chair. I think the comments raised by Councillor Hawkins are valid in terms of the timetabling. And I know there's been a lot of changes in terms of levelling up bill. But I suppose we need to continue in terms of our current timetable to bring forward the local plan and submit it in terms of the examination public towards the end of 23. There are going to be various issues which will arise during the consultation stages, and that may affect the timetable. But as you are aware, when we went out to Regulations 18 consultation, we did bring forward to members a new timetable, which was agreed, and we are following that timetable accordingly at the moment. But I do accept the comments raised by Councillor Hawkins and by the Chair in terms of the timetabling, and that could be affected in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chinna.
Chairman, one other thing I think it's only fair to say when looking at the local plan is that, yes, again, it's another fantastic team operating. We heard about the climate change, these local plan team, the amount of work they put out is outstanding and it's on time. It's incredible. So yet again, it just shows that Surrey Heath, we really are a good council. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins, I couldn't agree with you more. We are part of the committee. I know what the committee did. I'm sure the officers are working very hard behind the scenes to get it to keep it on track. Thank you for those comments. Thank you. as people know, would have noticed, I'm flicking pages. I've read the whole document. Small print. Anybody interested in small print? From page 81. Any questions on success measures? I don't see any hands up. All right. I've got a few, but I won't keep you. I can always raise it separately. Right. If there are no more questions, I see that Councillor McLafferty is delighted. It's taken only 45 minutes to do this. Right, great. Let's move on.
Sorry, I might be just about to preempt what you were going to say anyway there, but I'd hope the committee would agree. This is a pretty creditable set of results for a year. I think it's easy to forget just that, you know, this is a pretty brand new senior management team were put together during the lifespan of this plan. And also, I think I'm right in saying the 21st of June was Freedom Day 2022, and then it got moved to the 19th of July, Freedom Day, you know, ancient history now, but we were absolutely in the throes of the worst possible COVID, etc., lockdown, and to have come up with these results, I say I'm probably just preempting what you were about to say, and I'm sorry for that, but I just think the officers deserve our thanks for having done such a good job.
Councillor McLafferty, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, they have done a fantastic job. Well done to the team. I was going to thank the team at the end of the session, but I think it's a very good show by the officers. Well done to Mr. Roberts and his team. Good show. Well done. Agenda item 5, capital outturn and prudential indicators 21-22. We got Councillor Perry here and Mr. Watson, strategic director, Mr. Stevens and Mr. Watson here. And I'll hand it over to Councillor Perry, who is chomping to go.
Evening, Chairman. Could I just first make the point that if you would like me and other members, portfolio holders, to actually present to you, that you at least give us some advance notice of that fact. Because you criticised me in the past when I haven't turned up, when I've not had an invite. So I mean, even today, I have prepared, and I will do my best to present it with the help of Bob here. But I just want to make the point, if you want us to present and you want to question us, you need to give us some advance notice of that.
Okay, can I actually respond to that? I mean, as a scrutiny chair, I would generally expect the portfolio holders to be here, even if they don't answer, because it's important for the committee and whoever is watching this event to know there's a portfolio holder behind all these departments. I mean, officers are there to do the work and to guide you along. They are not here to generally answer most questions. All the detailed questions, I look to the officers to answer. Hence, my point, I'm making a general point now, I would like all the portfolio holders to be here when their subject matter comes up. It is important. Otherwise, pointless having a portfolio and you to be in charge and for you not to be there and the officers answering on your behalf. Despite the fact they may have briefed you, it's only not right and proper you be here. Sorry, Councillor Perry, off you go.
Right, I'll just make the point, even yourself earlier on weren't sure whether Councillor McLafferty or Louise was going to present. Anyway, I'll go on.
On that point, I just want to clarify that on that point. I actually double-checked with the officer who was going to present it, and the officer said it could be Councillor McLafferty or themselves, so hence my hesitation as to who was going to answer that first.
Fine. Okay, point's been made. So, capital outturn for 21-22. Hopefully this is the last year that had a really serious impact from COVID and what have you. We had an initial budget of capital expenditure of 14.024 million, when we actually spent 4.4 million. Of that, because of the effect of COVID and the freezing of a number of projects and all sorts of other issues, 8.2 million of that is being reprofiled into this year's budget. plus an additional number of items which are detailed here, which will be added to the 1.1 million that was approved back in February. So that's the nub of the report. All the detail is in the Annex S, so we'd be very happy to answer any particular questions that people may have.
Any questions from the people, the councillors here? Councillor White.
We'll put the budgets in for various projects that are going to go ahead. The one I keep banging on about is the Whitmore Road play area, which is...
I'm sorry, I can't actually hear very well.
The budget that's put in place for the Whitmore Road play area, which is on page 73.
Yeah.
It's been identified that that whole play area has to be redone. It's 33 years old. I have lived on that estate for 33 years and nothing has ever been done to that play area. As the notes say, the land transfer has now been agreed and we're waiting for county to enable us to go ahead with refurbishing that. But there's only a £25,000 budget for that. That's not even going to get a new slide. Could the budget be re-looked at and it be put on a par with the other play areas that have been refurbished within Surrey Heath, please?
Okay, I'm not sure. Do you know the background to that? I'm afraid I don't know the background detail to that particular item.
And again, I don't. It's just a budget that we've rephased or plan to rephase. Looking at it, it seems like there will be a contribution agreed with the county as well. So there's going to be obviously additional funding coming in from third party, i.e. the county, on that one. However, if it's deemed there's another increased budget bid required, it would have to be a bid that came in either as a supplementary estimate during the current financial year or into the new capital bid programme going forward. It's something that needs to be taken up with the service area, whether they need to put more money in there. They're the ones who control the amount of money they ask for.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I was looking a bit further on in the programme. Line 39, traveller site contribution, £127,000, pardon me. And then in the narrative, you have in there 127,000 to improve the facilities of the travelling community of the district. Fine. The SCC are awaiting a planning decision on the sites. And then SHBC contribution expected to be made in 22-23. Is the contribution that all Bs and Ds are making on the transit sites included in there, or is that the... and I really do not expect you to know, Councillor Perry, but that £127,000, does it include our three sites, isn't it? We have three sites. The refurbishment of those three sites and the contribution to the county that the Ds and Bs are making, or is that going to be a separate figure? Does that make sense?
I think it's the one we're doing cooperatively with other councils. It's been carried on for a number of years. To say, I believe that contribution is one which has been agreed with several other councils to jointly fund a traveller rest site for the county. Anything to add to that? That's been budgeted for some time.
It's an old budget that's been rolled forward. I'm expecting to make the contribution during this current financial year. The other line we have in the capital programme is money to support our local plan and works around identifying some traveller sites, obviously required to deliver the required number of pitches in the local plan.
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you. I think I should be able to resolve this confusion. This looks like the contribution from this council and a similar contribution from all the other boroughs and districts for a transit site provided by Surrey County Council. That was delayed and now is back in preparation and is expecting to come through either later this year or early next year. I don't think the description here is quite right because it should say transit site. So we shall take that away and make sure that's resolved before. I think the papers will have gone out for executive, but we'll make sure that's clarified when it comes to executive because I think it is a transit site.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any other questions for Councillor Perry or the officers here? I've got one question. This is the ward I represent from the Green, which is on page 72. It says, I mean, this has been going on for some time, and I see that the cost had gone up to between 300 to 400,000. I go to Frimley Lodge quite often, and it's dreadful, to be honest. It has to rain, and it's absolutely unusable. I think I would recommend that exec or the portfolio holders and the officer look at it very urgently to put some money into Frimley Lodge Park. It's heavily used. That's the beauty of it. We don't want to discourage people from going to that car park because we want to encourage them. Because we got the basic store canal there, and the lodge, the playing area in Frimley Lodge is fantastic. And as we know, we had the Jubilee event there. It was really an awesome place. So, and also over the summer weekends, it's being used heavily. We hope it doesn't rain. That's the only wish I have. If it does rain, it becomes a muddy pitch. So if somebody could look at that for me, please. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ditch. Councillor Ditch, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Ditch. Sorry, man. Councillor Bila was waving from downstairs. Sorry.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure Councillor Deach doesn't mind. It's just I suppose, there's no narrative around 25% roughly or 23% increase in the cost of the Camberley Bowls Club. It's on page 74. And also, I may be being naive in this assumption, but I'm assuming that those monies will be recovered from the leaseholder. So we've gone up from 45 to 55,000, which from the initial figure is quite a large increase. Maybe it's 22, 23, and my mental arithmetic's a bit warm for this time of the evening. And my assumption is that with the Camberley Bowls Club, that is something that we will recover from the leaseholder over the duration of the lease. I'm assuming that's not something that we are subsidising a small club to the tune of.
I really don't know the background to that particular one, other than is stated in this in the annex here.
Any officers can help out, Councillor Perry? Mr. Stevens, would you like to help out?
Apologies, Chair. I'm afraid I can't, but I'm quite happy to provide a written response back to Performance and Finance Committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councillor Deach, you want to come back?
Sorry, Councillor Malvagan, just before we move on, can I have assurance that we are recovering it should essentially be a net, there shouldn't be a cost to us because it's a lease. So it's on here as a cost, but I'm assuming that we are recovering the money back. So therefore, I'm sort of questioning why it's there and how we account for it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Can we kindly note that, please, and get back to with a written response if Mr. Stevens could come back and confirm that? I'll appreciate that. Councillor Deach, sorry about earlier.
No problem at all. I just wanted to just agree with you, first of all, Sashi, about the state of the car park at Frimley Lodge. But also, just to add to the point that, you know, that park is used from residents right across the borough, and because of some of the facilities there, the accessibility facilities there, by some of our more vulnerable residents and disabled residents. And I was a member of the executive and was one of the few executive members that exist now that have voted against the car parking charges they wanted to introduce at Frimley Lodge Park, and I hope that members of this council would vigorously oppose any attempts to impose car parking charges at Frimley Lodge Park. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Deitch. Any other questions? I have one more question. Most likely it's an officer who could answer this, Councillor Perry. It's on page 76. Which regarding ratio of financial cost to net revenue stream. The actual 2021 was 30.66. Then 21-22, it was 23.96. So my obvious question to the officer, have we reduced our loans, or is it just a calculation somewhere? I was confused when I looked at these numbers.
I can't give you the exact answer right now. It will be the calculation based on the numbers from the formulas in the outturn reports. If you want, I will give a reconciliation to yourself in writing from my team to explain what they are and how they're derived.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. I know our borrowings haven't reduced. Our borrowings all have been almost the same. I know the interest rate generally has been the same during this period. So I can't see the variance in that. I look forward to receiving your reply. Thank you. If there are no other items, I'm going to move on to agenda item 6. It's Councillor Perry and Bob Watson. Thank you. Page 77.
Are we meant to be muted? Can't hear a thing.
The original budget for the year expected a deficit of 1.6 million, which was recognised sort of halfway through the year. That was a likely outcome, so significant action was taken to try and limit that projected loss. And in fact, we've ended up with a deficit of 453,000, which obviously is a massive improvement against the original outcome there. The main movements are all shown on the page 2 of that particular report there. I have to say that we are in the middle of a star chamber exercise, which was started in response to that original forecast, and that caused all sorts of things to change the dynamics. People froze a number of projects halfway through until they were sure which way we were going on the new budget, and so on. We have to say here also that on the investment and development side, rentals across the board of the town centre and other commercial properties that we own have been better than originally forecast. So that's helped the situation as well. So as we go forward now for the current year, sorry, we're not on the forward year, sorry. This is the end of year forecast. So that's the number of that one. So we ended up with a deficit of 453,000.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I must add something to this because I must congratulate Mr. Roberts and his team for actually working very hard to try and reduce the outturned from 1.6 to 400,000, which is a lot. But again, I'm not going to question the 1.6 because those numbers were produced before you folks turned up. So I don't know how much of that is accounting and how much of that is actual. But again, the reality is 453,000 at the year end, which is still a loss. That's the way I look at it, because we are not used to having losses in this council. But having said that, well done to Mr. Roberts and his team. Good job done.
If I may, my observation is that a huge amount of work was done by our finance team, by our senior, by our corporate management team, by our wider management team, by staff in general, to do everything they could to constrain costs and any expenditure that wasn't essential, to make sure that we made significant inroads into closing that budget gap, because we knew that the more that we could close that gap last year, the better that we could start this year and the more confident we could be about the budget going forward. There is certainly a need for more savings in future years, but I think the last 6 months, last 8 months have been incredibly effective, and I think it's very much down to the staff and the support that members have given us in achieving that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Roberts. I also want to, sorry, Councillor Rice, a minute. I also want to actually add something. I mean, you did a presentation on the Star Chamber work, which I thought was very, very good. Hopefully, we'll be able to even cut that shortfall of 150 or 200,000 pounds still to be found. Hopefully we would, but still, that still leaves us with a 7 million to be dug out of the reserve. So having said all the good things, but we also have to bear in mind we are still digging into the reserves. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a couple of questions, really, and it's mainly to clear up my own confusion. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the team on the reduction to just under £500,000. I think it's very good from the position that was being reported, but I think that we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back completely, because, as the Chair said, it's still just about a near £500,000 loss, overspend, I mean. I do just want to point out there was the issue when the council tax breakdown was sent out, and there was the confusion regarding the chief executive line, and I just want to remake that point, because on page 78, 1.4, it just says chief executive again. It's small errors which I think cause big problems, essentially. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that again. Just regarding some of the overspends, and this is more of a question for Mr. Watson, specifically under investment and development, under town centre investment, there's a variance of 785,000. How much of that is due to lost rents, and how much of that is due to the J-put dividends? Because obviously they're in there together, and I'm just wondering what the cost of both points there is. Thank you.
As it says, the breakdown I haven't got to hand of the difference between the two. I can provide that certainly in more detail. It is a combination of both of those going through there. I would potentially say it was recognised early on throughout the year in the monitoring process that we were going to have the shortfall both in the J-put and in the rents we're getting in due to the reduced footfall in the town centre. And therefore, part of what's happened is that was driving most of the 1.6 initially and in the mid-year report. So I'll give you the breakdown, I'll go back and get it, but actually it does represent as well extra work done by the investment and development team in getting more and more properties filled. Certainly more difficult in the town centre, but some of our other industrial and office buildings, they've done a really massive job in getting it better.
Thank you. If I could just come back on another question. I meant to ask them both at the same time. I do apologise. Just regarding on page 82, Places Leisure, Camberley, it's 174,000. And I'm just wondering, because I thought that 174,000 was money that we hadn't spent So I do remember there was money that we hadn't spent, but had budgeted for Places Leisure, and that I was wondering, have I missed something, or is this an extra fee that we've had to budget for this year?
No, you haven't missed something. We missed something when we did the budgeting in February 21, and nobody actually fed the management fee into the budgeting process. Now, the management fee from Places Leisure is one that's going to be paying a lot of money into the council over the life of the contract. But as we had a lot of these management fees with leisure centres, we agree a staged process where actually we pay them at the start to cover their costs of investment into the leisure centre, into making the bid, and therefore we get a better management fee towards the end. You can do it two ways. You can say we'll have a standard management fee all the way through, and actually we then absorb the cost of their financing. The profile that we accepted was one where we would pay we'd pay them in year one and a little bit more in year two, and then by I think that year 4 or 5, we're bringing almost a 7-figure number into the councillor's income, which was a better deal. Obviously down the line, there is a risk in that, but I think, as you can all see, the success of that leisure centre in Camberley, it's a flagship leisure centre, and I think Places are making money out of it quite nicely, and we will log into the future.
Mr. Roberts.
And just to add just a small addition to that, I think the confusion probably came about because at the time we were reporting that this was a budget increase. We were also reporting that the costs, the capital costs associated with building and bringing the new leisure centre into fruition had actually underspent. And so we were reporting an underspend on the capital work.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this section? Seems I don't have any. Right. Yes, please. Agenda item 7, monitoring report.
Yes, the first quarter, I would say as a background to this, we were still in the same situation as we were mentioned in the previous report, and that we were going through Star Chamber process and really seriously looking at all of our budgets and what have you, before really looking ahead and going ahead with this year. And this has resulted in this first quarter showing some abnormalities, really. We've massively underspent in the first quarter against that forecast. And that was because a lot of things had been put on ice until we'd sorted out where we were going and what have you. And it's from now on, really, that things will get back to normal. So you've got the actual detailed breakdown there. But what we haven't done is changed the year-end forecast. So we could have just said, well, the first quarter's down by a third, basically. And that means the end is going to be much better. But we think a lot of that will come out of the wash as we go through the quarters as we go forward. So the bottom line is we've spent much less than we thought we were going to spend in the first quarter.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I mean, I was not going to push this boat out a lot today because it's the first quarter and Mr. Watson just came in, so I'm going to give you some leeway, Mr. Watson, to get your feet under the table a little bit more before I start pushing this boat a little bit harder. Sorry, Councillor Black.
Does that mean we will need to reset that budget profile so that the following quarter's actuals are more likely to track the budget?
Yes, we will. I will admit here and now this is the first time we've done, I think for a couple of years, a Q1 report. It's something that I wanted to bring in to try and give more transparency and more of a track throughout the year of where we're going to. So the allocation and profiling of budgets was done on a very crude, let's take 1 quarter of the annual budget. So there's not a lot of science around it at this stage, but it's what I would class to say is roughly right rather than exactly wrong. And that's what we're trying to get at this stage here. Yes, going forward, we'll work with the services to identify their budgets and to try and profile them. What I would say is the work that was done in the February Budget Council was designed to try and get the budgets in the right place and to get the right level of budgeting in there. So there's a bit more tweaking around it, which we'll do throughout the year, and it's an evolutionary process where we say, okay, that budget wasn't quite the right place, and we'll bring it in as we go along throughout the year. The team I've got are, some of them are quite new and still learning around it, and we're also trying to bring in a greater understanding and transparency with the services so they'll be able to take more ownership of their budgets. So part of it is introducing profiling, and it's introducing better forecasting as well, using proper forecasting techniques to say we do, and hence why at this stage in the process at Q1, and I thank the Chair for going easy on me, we are predicting to be on budget, so we have nothing that indicates to us that we're not going to be too far away from the original budget that we set. Obviously, as pressures come on throughout the year, we'll monitor those, we'll report those, and when we apply the Star Chamber savings into the budgets, we'll start monitoring to make sure we're getting the delivery of the savings and efficiencies that we declared we would be able to get. And that, for me, is probably the most important part of budget monitoring in this financial year, to make sure we're delivering what we said we're going to deliver.
So thank you for that. So the budget profile was just modelled as a straight line from month 1 to month 12.
Currently it is, yes.
Yeah, which doesn't reflect reality, which is why we've got this significant variance. Got it? Okay. Follow-up question then. Is there going to be a budget book published as there was last financial year?
Yes, we have a budget book. It is online for these services. I don't know whether we publish one actually on the intranet or the internet, and I will see if we go on there. Again, it's trying to make it understandable without making it overly technical, because some of the things in there, I'm not saying they're overly technical, but they mean more to the accountants than they do to the services and the lay reader. But certainly we'll have some plan of our budget profile as well, yeah.
Thank you. Just for Councillor Black's point of view, I mean, the budgets are published, and we have been through the session. We've approved it, exec approved it, the full council approved it, so it's published. It's a matter of actually how it's profiled is a question.
Yeah, what I was referring to was the detailed budget book. It was hundreds of lines. That was published for 21-22. And when I was trying to explain on my website how the budget was allocated, I could only go down to a certain level this year without that budget book. But you're saying that is now published online?
We have the budget book. I'm not sure it's on the internet at this stage. I'll look at it and make sure it's in there. Again, I will try and get a decently, not sanitised, but certainly readable version.
Councillor Noble, welcome to PNF. Off you go.
Thank you. Mr Watson, I hear what you say about the profiled budget being effectively a straight line basis, but it's just looking at these figures and in the context of the overall position that, you know, there's not too much variance, but the finance and customer services budgeted at 473,000 with the actual at 1.4 million seems quite an excessive significant variance. I just wondered if you could outline why that particular variance is so significant.
Yes, I can. Historically, and quite rightly so, the finance budget area has taken the hits for the one-offs that the council has. If, for example, you go back to the outturn report, there was managed vacancy factor held in finance, but the vacancy savings are actually made against the salary budgets in the service areas. So what I'm trying to do, and will be doing between now and Q2, is tidy up which of those elements in the finance budget, and it is the finance, it's not customer service, it's not revenues, it's in that they belong to the actual cost of running accountancy services for the council, and which are the corporate financing methods, the inflation and staff costs that go in there. So once I had that, it'll be a clearer picture. So in that case, the profile is probably more accurate than the actuals that have gone in, because some of them will need to be put into the corporate financing line, which you can see in there is also slightly different. So it's that element of just tidying and bringing it into, I suppose, how I normally run budgets on the corporate finance side rather than how it's been done previously. And it's probably just a change in 151s that creates that rather than anything particularly nefarious.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, just as possibly a wind-up comment on this. It's not. Yes, it is a wind-up. Firstly, I'm looking forward to seeing the video of Sashi Meets Bob. I think that we could. That might cover some of the costs of additional work imposed on the department. More serious point, picking up what Councillor Rice said earlier on. Yet again, we see in these papers, it's the chief executive. Can we please wash these through and, avoid this? It's chief executive department or something. But again, it's just that simple. And as this is a public paper, it's perception. And it'd be helpful if that was washed through. Thanks.
Well said, Councillor Hawkins. We shall put a special video out for you, Bob and I.
Can't wait.
Thank you. I have one question. If there are no other questions, as per usual, I have the last question. 1.6, Mr. Watson. Carry forward budget of 283.5 from 21-22 has been included in 22-23. I was a bit confused with that statement. I thought 21-22 is done, and we know we've actually made a loss of 453,000, £500,000. So I'm very confused as what this particular number is doing into 22-23 though.
Yes, no. When you look at the outturn report, there is a list of carried forward budgets on the revenue side that are in there. Now, regards to the fact that we had an overspend in there, there's a certain number of budgets that we will carry forward each year. Some will be because they are government grant funded, and if we don't carry them forward and deliver them, we will end up giving the government grant back to the government, which makes me go all shivery and upsets me a bit. The other one is that sometimes there's projects that we have started in 21-22, and we've committed budget to it, but we haven't completed the project, and we'll complete it in 22-23, and it's therefore right and proper that we carry forward the budget to support that. Otherwise, it will create a budget pressure from day one in the current financial year. So that 283 or 23.5 is the amount of budget that we have carried forward to, and then that's part of the executive papers going next week, asking them to approve that carry forward. Obviously, if they don't approve the carry forward, we'll have to readjust this Q2 outturn report to reflect it's not being carried forward at that amount. But we preempted at this stage to put it into the working budget. And paragraph 1.7 will be the reconciliation of that working budget, which will go on month after month when we go through. So in Q2, anything else that's changed, such as a supplementary estimate that's been approved anywhere, will go in there to show it's increasing the working budget.
Thank you very much for that explanation, which is acceptable at this moment. I'll leave the rest of it for the video. I see there are no other points to be raised on this particular item. Agenda item 8. Update on user enforcement agent for collection of arrears in council tax. I think, Mr. Councillor Perry, you may need the help of Mr. Fox here. I hope he's online. He is. Okay. Mr. Fox, you may have to show your face for us to see you.
You want me to speak to it?
Yeah, go on. Sorry, you start and Robert can.
Yes, Councillor Bates obviously raised this question at the previous meeting, and since then a thorough review of all our policies and procedures connected with this has been produced, which is what this report is all about. The concern was that we're being overzealous with using legal powers to sue people and what have you. I think this report shows, in fact, that we are being extremely sympathetic to those who are struggling to pay their council tax. They're given numerous reminders, offers of help, pointers in the right direction where they can get support and help and what have you. So a very small number actually end up being subject to any real legal things. And I think the main thing to bear in mind when looking at this is that our collection rate is 99.7% of the council taxes collected, and it's believed that the threat of being able to introduce legal powers when required is actually a very good deterrent and an incentive for people to pay. There are, unfortunately, a section of people out there that just don't want to pay, and they will not pay unless they really get to the last point. And quite a number of the people that are taken through this process actually come up with all the money and pay it on the nail when it's the day before they're doing court or whatever. So anyway, that's what the report is there to be considered, and I think the request is that we continue doing what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry. Mr. Roberts, you know, you and I received, and Councillor Wheeler also received a copy of an email Councillor Bates has sent out, and thank you for the reply, which I thought was very comprehensive. Councillor Wheeler, would you like to ask any questions, please?
Thank you, Councillor Malvagan. Yeah, I would. I've done some very basic arithmetic, and Mr. Fox, I may well have got them wrong, for which, if so, I apologise. I actually reckon, doing my very basic arithmetic, it has cost us £300 more than we've collected by using, in particular, bailiffs. And it was bailiffs in particular that Councillor Bates had taken exception to. And I based that on the three companies' data that you sent through to me, the cost of the initial amount that we pay them, plus for two of them, whereby the average amount covered was above the stage that the extra percentage comes in. So I think it's important that we pursue people legally. I do not support, and I know nor does Councillor Bates, the use of bailiffs. And actually looking at the evidence of the three companies that we've used, it would suggest that the figures that we collect versus the monies that we pay also don't support the use of bailiffs. I'm very happy to go through my calculations in greater detail with anyone if they're interested, maybe not linked to this, but I would urge again that we look at the use of bailiffs. We continue to pursue people legally. We continue to use our own legal department and our own ways of collecting, but looking at the figures that are presented from the number of people that we use. I'm assuming that all three companies that we're using do the same thing, and all three of them are bailiff-based companies. It's not cost effective, and certainly the level of distress that it causes some residents, certainly for me, is evidence that it's simply not worth it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. I mean, Councillor Wheeler has seen the letter from Councillor Bates, and he's of the same opinion that using bailiffs is not the right thing to do, but if it just encourages, I won't read the whole email to you. It'll encourage them, it may impose undue stress on the individuals. It may be that, I know you, Mr. Robert, your department does call them first one and so forth. You go through a process which you've laid out in an email to us. That's fine with me. Is there anything you want to add, Councillor Wheeler, on Mr. Bates' email? Or are you happy with the way I've summarized it?
I'm happy with the way that we've summarised it, but I would urge that we look at the use of bailiffs. We do more analysis on their cost effectiveness, and we look at different ways of recovering the small percentage that won't pay. I think Mr. Fox would like to come in.
Thank you. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I think my email reply may have confused. We don't pay any fees to our enforcement agents. The enforcement agents have statutory fees that they charge when they collect the debt. So we pass over the debt to them. So if we pass over 355 debts to them, and then they send out 355 letters to the debtors, they can charge £75 per letter. Now that fee is then collected by the enforcement agent from the debtor. Surrey Heath has no liability for that cost. And if the debtor then doesn't make an arrangement or doesn't pay in full, and they make a visit, they charge a visit fee, which I think is, I'm going to have to do this from memory because it's £235. Again, that fee is incurred and charged by the enforcement agent, and there's no liability for Surrey Heath. For these three companies, there is no cost to Surrey Heath for using those companies. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah, please.
Thank you. If I can just come back on that then. We've got a very small percentage of people that don't pay, and those people that are struggling the most to pay, we are adding £300 to their debt by taking this method. I struggle, really, really struggle with that as a concept. And then on top of that, obviously, we've got auctioneers' fees and all the rest of it that come back from it. I think maybe this is something we need to look at more fully as a council, but I'm not sure that this is the right committee to address it.
Thank you for your comments, thank you for your comments, Councillor Wheeler. I'm actually on your side. We need to find a way out of this. It's a difficult one from a council's point of view, I must admit, but we need to look at it. Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the difference needs to be distinguished between the can't pays and the won't pays. The can't pays, I think this council does everything, bends over backwards to help. But the won't pays, if they don't get enforcement action, they just carry on thinking, sorry, to do nothing about it. It's the same issue with enforcement, planning enforcement. If we don't, you know, the people who can't comply, well, we work with them, but the ones that won't comply, they need enforcement action. So I'd just like to make that point clear.
Thank you for the Councillor. I'm almost on the same page as you are. There are people who take the stretch their imagination not to pay. There are people who genuinely cannot pay. Councillor Watson. Sorry, Mr. Watson.
I like the idea. No. Just to point out that when someone is unable to pay, the enforcement agents will not be able to collect their fees for it. So, yes, we may be adding the money onto their debt, but they're not going to pay the debt anyway. They can't pay the debt. There's nothing to seize. So, therefore, the enforcement agents don't get their money in the same way that we don't. So, the only time where the enforcement agents will get their money is when somebody is able to pay and does pay. So, I understand what you're saying about we certainly do not target those that can't pay. If someone can't pay, we won't collect. If somebody can pay, just doesn't want to pay, then quite rightly we will collect, and we will collect it, and the enforcement agents will collect their share of the money on it. What is keen, I like that we haven't really stressed, and it is in the report, is the fact that some people have real debt problems, but it's not until they actually have that knock on the door from an enforcement agent, they then come and talk to us in Robert's team and say to them, you know, I can't pay, how do I do it? And we can then help these people. We can put them on payment plans, we can refer them to the Citizens' Advice and debt counselling people to help them out, but it's quite often, until you get to that point, that we can they actually will come and talk to us about it. I know it's wrong, but sometimes you have to go to this stage to get these people to acknowledge they have a debt problem and something like that. And we're not trying to drive people into the hands of loan sharks or payday loans. What we want is to get the people to engage with us, to work with our revenues team to help them pay what they owe us, but also if they have bigger debt problems, to put them in the hands of the agencies and charities that can help them.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Just following off from that, would it be possible to then have the number of cases that have come to the council since being handed to bailiffs? Because I agree with you that it could be that a knock on the door does get them to then admit that they have a debt problem, but my family has experienced bailiffs before, and I can guarantee that a bailiff knocks on the door and they're not there to go, oh, do you have a problem? You can go and speak to the council. They're there to collect the money. So what is the actual number of cases coming into the council? Because if it's, Councillor Wheeler just showed me some figures, so it's around about 1,000 cases in 2021. How many of those 1,000 came to the council to ask for debt support and debt relief? Also, just on page 99, when it's on page 1.1, on figure on point 1.15, and it's got Surrey Heath Borough Council has issued, and it's got the things. It says 5 final notices, but then 1,153 summons. How have we got over 1,100 summons with only 5 final notices? I do forgive me if I'm not understanding that system correctly, but I would imagine if you only get summoned if you've avoided a final notice. So if there's only 5 final notices being issued, how are there then over 1,000 summons? Is that 1,000 also including the number of cases referred to debt collection? And also, it's good to see that there's the use of SMS reminders. 120 is very low compared to the amount of annual bills that get sent out and the amount of first reminders. Would it be possible to have a reason why it's only 120? Is it purely we just don't have those numbers, or is it a system issue? Just if we can work to improve that numbers, I think if you're able to get straight into someone's telephone to say you need to pay this, it's actually quite a good reminder more than a letter, because it's very easy to ignore letters. It's not so easy to ignore a text when it comes up on your phone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. I think I'm going to hand it straight to Mr. Fox to answer those points.
Thank you, Chair. If I take them in reverse order, SMS messaging, we rely on people signing up to that service. So we have about 2,000 people so far that have signed up to SNS messaging. And we each time we send a correspondence to people, we try and encourage them to sign to that. In regard to the figures for reminders, second reminders, final notices and summonses, the way council tax collection works is you get a reminder the first time you don't pay an instalment or you don't pay the right amount. If you bring your debt back up to date, then your payment arrangement continues. If you default again, you'll get a second reminder. And if you bring your accounts up to date, you can carry on with your instalments. And then if you default a third time, you get a final notice. So, on the other ones, if you don't bring your reminder up to date, you go straight to get a summons. You don't bring your second reminder up to date, you go straight to a summons. So the final reminder reflects those people that have had 2 reminders but failed to bring after the second one, have failed to maintain their instalment plans.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Any follow-up on that?
I'm assuming that Mr. Fox doesn't have the figures to the first point I made. If I could just have that as a written answer, please. I don't need personal information. All I need is, and I would appreciate if this is sent to the entire members of the committee, that it's just a number of cases that have come into the council seeking debt relief after their case has been given to a debt collection agency. Thank you.
I can provide that in a written answer for Councillor Rice.
Councillor Wheeler.
Is just to say that the council tax free text message reminder service link on the council website isn't working. It's not going through, so if maybe we could look at that, it might help people to sign up to it.
Okay.
I believe, I mean, they'll check it out, but I believe it's to do with an update they have done, but I'm sure officers will get back to you. But, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. If there are no other questions, sorry, Councillor,
I'm waving
sorry,
at you.
Mr. Fox. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins.
I'll just wave at you. Just for clarification, Councillor Rice, I assume you mean the number of people that have come in and we've actually we've sat down and worked through the debt process and tried to work through, that's the number I'm wanting, the number of people that have come in that we've helped and passed on to the other, citizen advice and other training and other providers to help these people to put them onto an even standard. I assume that's the figure that we're looking for.
Well, it's both, really. Because I'm suspecting that the number that have actually come into the council after being knocked on the door by a bailiff is very low.
Yeah.
So I would actually, I agree with you, Councillor Hawkins, that I would appreciate the number that have come in and then the number that have actually been assisted by the council.
Yeah.
Both sets would be useful, mainly because I suspect that the number, if at all, is low.
Yeah, thanks very much. Two very, very quick points, Chairman, conscious of the time. This covers council tax. Is there a similar exercise? Is there a similar paper coming for NNDR? Because we collect that, and I'm interested to see how that has managed against how much we're due and the percentage that we are actually. I know it's been difficult times, but the percentage that we're getting is going to be nowhere near as good as the council tax. We've always been good on council tax. And the other point is, I think it's my reading of it, but there's something about paragraph 1.18 on page 99. I just don't like the sound of it. It smacks a little bit of, somebody getting a call from HMRC, sort of a spam call or something. It may be me being overly sensitive. Which is not something I'm normally accused of, I admit, but I don't like it. I don't like the wording there. The sense may be right, but I'm just struggling with that one. Thank you.
I'm going to hand it straight to Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Chair. For council business rate collection, in 2021, we were the top business rate collection authority in the country. And for 21-22, we were also the top business rate collection authority in the country, collecting 99.6. 99.8 and 99.7% of all debts collected that were due in the year.
The point, Mr. Fox, point Councillor Hawkins is making is maybe we should put a subsection to this next time around, so it's there for everyone to see. Thank you. Councillor Rice.
So can I just come back on that one? It's still my nervousness over paragraph 1.18. Don't want to go on tonight about it, but if somebody could just, put my mind at rest that it is not going to be treated as a spam call. Maybe Councillor Wheeler's going to do that now.
Well, I hope so. I was going to say it's about comms, isn't it, really? So it's about making sure as long as the comms goes out correctly, and as long as people know that they dial a telephone number with a reference as opposed to picking up the phone to the SMS message, and we communicate the number that they can contact us on as a main number, then it should be okay. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I probably have more blocked numbers in my mobile phone now than I do friends' numbers, which is a bit sad, isn't it? What can I say?
Mr. Fox.
Yeah, the SMS, the telephony company is a company called VoiceScape, and they I've done a big work with Middlesbrough Council, and the one thing so that you know it's not a spam call is the number they get is a direct number to call back to Surrey Heath staff. So there's at no point is there any automated voice speaking to them or them having to ring a random number. The number they ring it is an 01276 Surrey Heath number, which then connects them to an officer. But I can give further details around that if you would like, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. I have one. Okay, let me ask. I have one question for you, Mr. Fox. I mean, me being me, spreadsheet doodahs. I actually added up all three, what do you call, companies. And if you add in terms of numbers you sent out and the numbers they're given back to you, returned, so on and so forth, in your letter, you actually, number of cases handed out, numbers returned, and number paid, those three columns. If you add it for the three companies, you will find, you don't have to answer this now, I know you've got to go and work on it. You will find that the values are still monies outstanding. I'm sure there's a reason for it, so it doesn't tie up to coming up to zero. That is, it's not been written off, or if it's not been written off, so on and so forth. So when we produce this, I would suggest that you try and see what has been written off or not, because that will give us an idea as well. Thank you. Just for you to take this away. Yep. Thanks. Sorry, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Fox, just a question regarding the council tax and business rates collection, and it's very good that we're the best. What is the average nationally of a council's collection rates? I don't know if you have that to hand. And again, the question really is, if are lots of councils around the 99.7% mark, and we're just edging ahead by a small amount, or are we miles ahead of other local authorities?
From memory, and perhaps I'll not answer, I think the average for non-metropolitan councils is around 96% for business rates. I don't know council tax, but I have a table that lists all local authorities by the percentage they collected, which I will share with members of the committee if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Fox, and thank you for your time and all the work you put into getting these numbers, one of the best in business rates collection in the country. Well done to you and your team. Can I also now, moving on to agenda item 10, the final item. I'm coming to that. I was going to do that with the task and finish group. With agenda item 10, I was going to. Task and finish group, Mr. Watson, would you like to update us?
Thank you, Chair. The task and finish group has met, and we've got some terms of reference agreed where we're going to looking at. I have now managed to collect the data in that I need to. I just need to then put it into a report back to the task and finish group. Once I've had that meeting with yourselves and task and finish, we can then produce a report on what we want to do. Next steps are bringing a report back to this committee.
Thank you for that, Mr. Watson. Well, I mean, this is carried on a bit longer. I think generally the committee is getting a bit impatient, but it's dragging on. Hopefully we can try and finalize it before the next PNF meeting and produce it at the PNF meeting. I'm sure my vice chair is part of the task and finish group who is here, and we'll find time to meet up with you and finish this one for once and for all. Other point I have to actually raise, this is for the CEO. Mr. Councillor Allaway has been on the case with me eternally for the last, in that intervening period since you had a meeting, or you didn't have a meeting with Mr. Allaway regarding ISO. I don't know if you want to elaborate on this and get an answer out to the CEO. You need to put the mic.
Yeah, just a number of questions emanating from the last time we spoke about it. I think it was executive or full council. So if I could get some answers on progress and a few specific questions, that'd be terrific.
So if
would you like an answer now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Please, and thank you, Councillor Allaway. So the outcome of the original discussion was that we would look not to pursue accreditation, which I think Councillor Alleyway agreed with. That wouldn't be a cost-effective thing to do. But we would seek to integrate as many of the elements of ISO 9001 into the way that we manage our projects, our performance, our governance, our service reviews, and that's exactly what's been happening. So there's been a much greater focus on risk management since those discussions. In fact, as a senior team, we're only reviewing the Council's corporate risk register yesterday. A much greater focus on our annual governance statement, a lot more rigorous approach to look at areas of potential weakness and areas that need to be addressed. So that sense of continuous improvement, that's a key part of ISO 9001. A much greater focus on performance indicators and regular performance monitoring. Mr. Watson's already outlined the work we're doing to upgrade and uprate the approach to financial management that's taking place with much more frequent and more rigorous financial monitoring, more training and empowerment of budget managers to make sure that that work is happening. As opportunities arise, either through the review of our internal procedures and policies, or in terms of the opportunity to have independent review, we're looking at building that in. So one of the reports that's coming to Executive next week is a report seeking agreement on setting a date for an external peer review. So to create the opportunity for external subject experts in local government to come in, spend a few days with us, work their way through our key documents, interview members and officers, and come to a view as part of a quality assurance approach. So my goodness, we're only at the beginning of that journey. I'm not going to pretend for a minute that in a few months we have covered all the bases with ISO 9000, but I think we're making really good progress.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Executive. I think it's Sarah, isn't it, that was looking at it, and she did a sterling job at the first meeting and discussion. It's just that we sort of haven't seen anything officially yet. But all of that sounds really good if we could get that sort of reported at the next opportunity so we can just keep track of it, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts, for that explanation. Agenda item 10, I hope all of you have read it, and anything change, amend, please give us a shout. As we know, these PNF meetings are long, and can I thank the officers, Mrs. Livingston in particular, to trying to keep the documents as short as possible this time around on this segment, which normally takes up a 3 or 2 for every print. So this has been shorter than previous times. So thank you for that. Any points raised? Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. It's just because I think probably as we move into 2023, I think it would be worthwhile having a report on the climate change working group again. I know we've had an extensive discussion this evening, but if it's a good time to have the climate change officer at the committee. I can't actually remember when she was here last. I believe it was like about 6 months ago. So ideally, I would say if they were to attend in the January 23 with the Environment and Health portfolio holder, that would make sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you can make a note of that, that'll be great. Yeah. If there are no other points to be raised on the work program, may I thank everyone for attending today's PNF meeting, particularly the officers who have done a good job and for the progress we have made so far. So thank you again and good night.